You've probably heard recently, amidst all of the talk about the state of the Democratic Party, that they have something of a Latino problem. That's generally how it's identified. But what does that actually mean? Where are they doing well? Where are they not doing well? And what can they do to improve their position in the future? President and CEO of the United States Hispanic Business Council, Javier Palomares, welcome to the show as well.
Thanks for having me, John.
I'm ready to dive into all of this with you. Christina, first of all, and I want to get this perspective from both of you. When people say that this problem exists, they're not often necessarily super specific about what it means, where it might be true, where it might not. To the extent that this problem does exist, how would you define it?
I tend to put the Hispanic or Latino problem that the Democrats are having in two buckets. One is a bucket that would be labeled abandonment and neglect. And then the other one would be labeled the economy and financial prospects. If you go to the abandonment and neglect bucket, the Democratic Party historically has counted upon the Latino vote and has received it for time immemorial. For the last couple of elections, there was a disproportionate amount of time, energy, resources, and finances focused on other minority groups, and rightly so. Minority groups to include the African American community, the LGBTQ community, the Asian community. Nothing wrong with that, but it was done almost at the exclusion of the Latino community. And so the strategy appeared to be, we got the Latino vote, don't worry about it, it's all good, let's focus on these other pockets. Maybe not the best idea. If you look at where we stand today, there are more Hispanics in America than there are African Americans and Asians combined. According to the last census in 2020, African Americans comprised about 12% of the population, Asians comprised about 6%, combined about 18%. Latinos, we comprised about 19.5% of the population, and we continue to be the fastest growing segment of the population. So you can't ignore a community for that long and expect it just to show up when you need the vote. And so now you see Democrats kind of struggling, trying to figure out what was the last thing we talked about and where do we pick up? And so when they do talk to us, it's kind of one-way communication and it's unidimensional. They talk to us about immigration. Nothing wrong with it. We care about immigration. But if you really understand our community, to Christina's point, there are other things that matter more to us. The economy, healthcare, education, national security, and yes, immigration, but maybe fourth or fifth down the line. And so the tonality is wrong, the timing is off, and you're seeing the results of that in pockets like South Texas, where Hispanics are leaving in droves to the Republican Party, which has been quietly, creating a ground game and talking to the Latino community very effectively about the issues that matter, the economy, jobs, inflation, and things of that nature.
Well, I want to stay on that for just a minute because I think both aspects of what you talked about are likely part of why we're seeing this shift. You definitely have that abandonment. You have the lack of focus, and even when the focus is there, it doesn't tend to be very deep. It's like an inch thin. You mentioned there that the Republicans are developing this ground game and talking about these issues. So that's like an acknowledgement of those problems. Do you feel like the inroads they're making are a result of them putting forward, potential plans to solve those problems, or is it simply acknowledgement and a little bit of attention?
It's really acknowledgement and attention. There's no real plan from the Republicans of how they're going to make things better. It's simply a calling out of how badly things are going. But with that said, there is no argument that things are not going well. I mean, if you look at where we stand right now, we're dealing with inflation that is at about 9.5%. I mean, that's the worst inflation we've seen in half a century. We're used to like 1.8, 1.9, if that. We're dealing with 9.5% inflation. You've got energy costs that are going through the roof. And when energy goes up, everything goes up. Transportation costs more, distribution costs more, warehousing costs more, pharmaceuticals cost more, fertilizer, cosmetics, everything costs more when energy costs more. And so we're not, the Democratic Party is not talking to the Latino community about the reality that we're living. And therein lies, I think, an opportunity for Republicans to jump in. They haven't offered any solutions. They've simply pointed out that these things are going wrong, and sure enough, they are.
I know that your focus, is going to be on the more business side. To the acknowledging, of course, that Latinos in different parts of the country, in different socioeconomic classes, whether they're new arrivals or third gen, are going to have very different economic interests. Are there any general lessons that the Democrats or Biden specifically could take for communicating around those topics?
Absolutely. There's so much ground to cover here. First of all, before I forget, shout out to Chuck Rocha. That guy's been preaching the gospel since time immemorial. And the Democratic Party would have done well by themselves if they'd listened to him a long time ago. We'd be in a different position today. So Chuck understands and knows what he's talking about. And you're right. I mean, they bring him in for literally a few weeks and not to be seen again until the next election. That's not the way to do it. I'd like to use two smaller data points to kind of talk to a broader issue. Two indicators that I look at, and that I think that Latinos maybe don't look at it necessarily in that fashion, but they're feeling it this way, that are, I think, really important in trying to figure out and take the temperature of the Latino community. Those two key indicators are Hispanic household income and Hispanic home ownership. If you look at household income, in 2018, it was about 54,000 median household income in the Latino community. 2019, it went to 57. We were feeling pretty good. And then all of a sudden, by the end of 2020, we were down to 55, and we're trending lower now. And so this is real for the Latino voter. And so they're feeling this literally every single day with no prospects or anything to kind of give them any hope that there's relief coming. The second indicator is Hispanic home ownership. From 2019 to 2021, 3-year period, it went from 47.5% to like 48.4%, almost a full percentage point. Yeah, and I thought, well, that's not bad. But then you look at African American home ownership in the exact same time period, and it went from like 42% to 45.8%. So 3.8 percentage points. That's about a 400% increase compared to the Latino community in the exact same time period. So the average Latino, to Christina's point, isn't thinking about it in that perspective. They just know their personal reality. And that's what happens. And then you go to the broader point. I think Hispanics kind of traditionally have been socially more conservative. And when government or entities that have promised economic delivery, economic success, when they don't deliver on that, then Hispanics go back to their roots and they go back to the conservative kind of view. And we're seeing that right now. And no one's really calling it what it is. But when you look at the smaller data points, it begins to point and kind of you connect those dots. It creates that picture. And that's what we're seeing right now. And to the point that Christina made, though, I don't want to cover the whole thing in black and blue. There are some real bright spots. As I said, I just came from the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. I spent about 10 days down there. I was in McAllen. I had the good fortune of meeting a young woman named Morgan Lamantia. She's a Democrat, proud Democrat, in the belly of the beast. One is doing exceptionally well. But if you listen to her messaging, John, it's about jobs. It's about wages. It's about the economy. It's about healthcare. It's about security. And I would venture to say, rule of thumb, that her constituency is probably like 85, 90% Latino. She's a Democrat, proud of it, but she's hitting the right tonality. And lo and behold, she won. And to Christina's point, there are bright spots in this battle. I just wish that Washington would watch the Morgan Lamantias and see what they're doing and study from them, and then create a larger message that talks about the issues that truly matter to the Latino family: the economy, jobs, and national security, inflation, things of that nature. Immigration, yes, but down the line. Right now, we need to take care of business.
I agree. Yeah, no simple single solution, but they can't continue to act as if there are no solutions, that there aren't people, whether it's activists, whether it's campaign advisors and those sorts of things, or as you've identified, some candidates who have figured out elements of this. There are things that can be learned if they care enough to actually look.
Or worse yet, they can't continue to behave as though there aren't any problems. There surely are problems. We need to solve them.
Yeah. Well, to that end, I do appreciate both of you taking time out to join us and lending your perspective. I really do appreciate it. So thank you to both of you.
Thank you. Good day. Bye.